Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Paul Krogdahl and Ville Sontu. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to Season 9 of Fintech Daydreaming. It is our privilege and happy moment for us to start this season by the usual Nordic Fintech Highlights episode. The next episode will be with our usual guests being as part of the podcast, but we really wanted to start the year with this Nordic Fintech Highlights version of our podcast. My name is Ville Sontu. I will be your host for today's episode, but as usual, I'm never alone. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Paul Krogdahl. So, Paul, it's the beginning of 24 and the first news episodes. How do you feel?
I ache. I ache. I am sore all over. So one of my New Year's resolutions was to start going back to the gym again. You know, I've had this sort of health process all of last year. You know, I sort of would go for walks and listen to a podcast, and it was a nice way of starting the morning, being an early bird, getting up at 4:30 and all of that sort of stuff. But for this year, I decided I would start going to the gym, particularly, you know, we'll get to this later around ePassi and everything else, but because my, the company I work for is happy to subsidize my fitness and well-being, I decided that the gym was in order. And I have now been to the gym for 3 days and I can't move my arms.
So that means it's working, I guess?
It's demonstrating I'm getting bloody old. That's what it's doing.
You know, some people say that, you know, if it hurts, it's just, you know, the weakness leaving your body. That's the sign of that. So it's the usual thing in January. We're going to follow up on this, by the way, Paul, if you're going to still keep on doing this in February, because according to my experience, everybody works out in January, but in February, it's bygones. But anyway, we will definitely get back to this. Yeah. But as this is the Nordic Fintech News episode, of course, we have with us, as usual, Janne as well. So, Janne, how has 2024 treated you so far?
Quite well. Cold, of course, but good start for a year. No massive New Year's resolutions, but I'm planning on a skiing trip. Last year I didn't make it. That was probably my own lousiness, but that's definitely my go-to thing for this winter. And then work-wise, as always, try to delegate more and focus more on the fun stuff myself, but I don't have a very good track record on that, but maybe this year.
Indeed. But the one thing we do know, it's never slow times in the Nordic fintech space, and Janne, you are in the middle of it. So we're going to get into all of the good news that we had from December, since this is a January episode. But overall, I mean, now we're at the beginning of 24, and we can reflect back to 23, especially the December updates from the Nordic fintech space. So how was it? I mean, what was the overall atmosphere? What was the kind of key takeaways from your perspective at Fintech Farm when it comes to December 23?
So looking at December, well, quite the usual. I would say, of course, December is commonly not the most active month, but still pretty decent amount of good news as well. Funding side, Insurely raised 90 million Swedish crowns, Meniga raised 15 millions. Few transactions will go there. So ePassi doing some acquiring, and then Lia Bank also. Visma actually raised 4 billions. Obviously, Visma is not fully a fintech company. It's a huge software warehouse, but they have a lot of fintech activities or subsidiaries, you could say. And that's actually a company that has been acquiring Nordic fintech companies nearly on a monthly basis. So with this news, I'm expecting to see a lot of activity there also this year. Otherwise, on the new partnership and launch side, it's payments, open banking, and payments as usual. Biometric companies still pretty active, which we already talked about a few episodes ago. Banks are also doing stuff, so we'll discuss that also later. And then big companies like Klarna always on the news, like mentioned, open banking, Neonomics, open banking payments especially. So pretty vibrant month again. But yeah, looking forward what this year will bring. But I think we have already the main themes for the year here. It's most likely going to be quite much in the open banking and payment space, but I'm very positive that we will also see a bunch of new trends as well.
I actually have a quick question on that. Open banking. We've seen trends in the past, Ville, right, where the industry suddenly ends up with a proliferation of vendors in the same space. I think if we go back 2 years, it was all the cloud native core banking providers, right? And there was just an explosion of them. It feels almost like we're getting an explosion of open banking providers now that are sort of like saying we can create the aggregation of the bank's APIs and make it easier for you. But how many open banking provider companies do we need in the Nordics before we just feel like we're saturated with them?
That's a good question, because a few years ago we saw these big transactions with Visa, MasterCard, I think, but yet there has been merging a lot of companies. Only the Nordic markets, not so many in Finland, but in Sweden, a whole lot of companies. They have different focus. Some of them are a bit more on the account data. Some of them are more on payment side, specifically business B2B payments and so on. But it's true, the field is getting quite crowded and most of them seem to do pretty okay at this stage. They're raising funding, they're closing new deals. Of course, it's hard to say. Well, it's not even expected for them all to make bottom line yet. But yeah, it's interesting to see how the situation settles. That will we eventually end up in a more like Visa, MasterCard kind of a duopoly rather than having actually a dozen of companies coming from the Nordics.
So me and Paul, we did our usual end of the year episode, the last episode of last season, where we gave our predictions or our best guesses on what's going to happen in 24. But Janne, I mean, from your perspective, comparing 2023 and your predictions for 24, what do you think we should be looking at, and what's going to be different between 23 and 24? Or is it going to be just more of the same?
Well, having been in fintech for a while, I would say that it's not wise to predict anything dramatic or give any like annual trends because it's sure that things we were seeing that started to evolve a couple of years ago, they are still cooking and going forward. So I don't expect anything like super dramatic to happen. What I think this or last year was we started already see like practical things on the big tech side, which has been a very hyped area for many years. So I'm expecting the American big techs to take more steps towards fintech this year. Will we see it in practice in Europe yet this year? Probably not, but I think that's the interesting trend I'm actually at least I'm following very much.
Yes, interesting. And for the record, I think speaking of making predictions, we are recording this on the 10th of January. So to kind of put the date on this conversation a little bit, because one of the things that has been popping a lot, not specifically in the Nordics, is really the Bitcoin ETFs. So again, providing this new on-ramp for people to invest in Bitcoin and crypto in general. And I think Bloomberg is predicting like 90% probability that the ETF will be approved in the very near future. The reason I wanted to mention this is because even though Bloomberg puts it at 90%, I'm actually going to make a prediction. And again, I will be happy to be wrong about this, that the Bitcoin ETF will not happen during this year. So let's see if I'm kind of going against the trend and I will be proven wrong literally the next hour after we finish this recording. That's fine, but I would actually predict that the Bitcoin ETF will not happen, not this year. But
I'll join you on that bet, Ville, because you know my loathing of Bitcoin.
So we have to differentiate between what we would hope would happen and then what we think that will happen. And well, in this case, I think it's going to be both for me. So I don't think it's going to happen. Bitcoin enthusiasts, of course, are very optimistic about this. But yeah, again, it's going to be an interesting conversation once again.
Yeah, I've been clearly surrounded by Bitcoin enthusiasts lately because it has seemed to be very, very like a certain thing that it will happen. But it's good to talk to you guys, so you know someone will bring me back to the ground.
I mean, the Bitcoin enthusiasts are not alone when Bloomberg puts it at over 90% probability. So again, we are a little bit on the contradictory side here at the moment. So, but anyway, we're not here to talk about Bitcoin, or maybe next episode we can talk about how the ETF was approved after all and how wrong we were. But that's all fine. It's what happens in fintech. And that's all fine and well. But let's get on with the kind of a little bit of a deeper dives into selected topics of what we saw in the newsletter that came out just recently from Fintech Farm. So as usual, you will be able to subscribe to the newsletter from Fintech Farm website and all the usual social media channels for you to get all the kind of updates on the Nordic fintech space and the stories that we're talking about here, even here in the podcast. But in order to give some color and texture to these news headlines, we usually do this a bit of a deeper dive onto a few of these headlines. And this time we're going to start with you, Paul. Which one did you pick from the newsletter this time?
You're picking me to start. Wow. There we go. So out of all of the ones that news articles that came out for December, the one that caught my eye was around ePassi. You know, having used ePassi now to get my gym membership and demonstrate how old I am. I actually think, I mean, also on top of that, Janne, you did the fintech review, right? Early or late last year, where ePassi was showing fantastic growth as a fintech in Finland or in the Nordics.
Yeah.
And they're just exploding. They're continuing that growth. They acquired a European company called Exercite, which now means that ePassi can expand out into mainline Europe, including UK with their capabilities, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I mean, hats off to ePassi and the fantastic growth that they're doing. But I also, you know, by the time this episode goes out, I will have published my next blog post, which looks at the growth of digital wallets in the Nordics, actually globally. And I think, you know, if you look at the capabilities that ePassi puts into what at the end of the day is fundamentally a digital wallet, and that expansion, I'm starting to see digital wallets as an equivalent of super apps, but for the Western market, right? I don't think we're ever going to see a WeChat type super app in Europe or in the Western demographics. But the expansion of digital wallets like ePassi have done, where the capability for us as an individual to, you know, we talked about this earlier, Villa, right? I've paid for my gym membership. You pay for your lunches subsidized by your employer. You can buy cinema tickets. You can pay to take your family to the museum. The capabilities are just growing and growing. And now ePassi buying, you know, Exercite, I think in the news I saw that they're going to end up with 15 million subscribers or users on this platform. The future is definitely around digital wallets, and I'm intrigued as to how the banks in the Nordics are going to react to this, because they've often said embedded finance in the Nordics, nah, we're not worried. We're going to continue to maintain the ownership of the customer journey. Not if ePassi has anything to do with it, you won't. I mean, it's becoming a central point for many people. So fantastic. That was my news from all of them.
Yeah, I mean, let me pick a few kind of elements out of the ePassi story. So first of all, ePassi is not the only provider of such solutions. Even here in Finland or in the Nordics in general, of course, there are different schemes, different providers of this. Call them digital wallet solutions for typically for corporate related subsidization of different types of payments. And I myself, I use, I mean, since we mentioned ePassi, I can also mention that I use Edenred, which is another similar kind of a scheme that you can use for subsidized lunches and all sorts of benefits you get from the employer. But let me present maybe one small piece of this kind of discussion, which is that aren't these kind of purpose-specific payments and that you're able to spend your money and that you get it partly subsidized and kind of have these rules embedded on the payment itself? Isn't this programmable money? Isn't this programmable payments? Question mark?
To a certain degree, it is, right. But if you look at we're focusing in on ePassi now. Yes, there is a plethora, just like we talked about open banking. I think we're going to see an explosion of digital wallets, and then we're going to see a consolidation and some mergers and acquisitions, and some will survive, some will die, and everything else. But ePassi seems to be quite strong in the market already. But one of the things that ePassi does is, you can connect through open banking your own banking accounts to it, so you can fund your ePassi wallet with your own money, so that you can enrich the capabilities of what you can buy and pay for past what your employer will give to you. The other thing that I think is fascinating with ePassi is the fact that they've created a partnership with Finnair, so I can actually pay for things with my Finnair loyalty points. So taking all of that together, it's yes, I agree with you. It's programmable money when it's seen from the fact that it's subsidized by your employer, but it is a growth of that digital wallet into more of an ecosystem, single point of wellness for your financial capabilities, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm glad you kind of brought this all together, basically. So we have digital wallets and we have programmable payments. And let me check my notes. Does this work on the blockchain? No, it doesn't. Exactly. So again, I think it's a fun example of taking a lot of the narratives when it comes to these programmable payments and money, and just actually implementing it with a fairly traditional solution of having a digital wallet with good acceptance network built, good partnership network built on a platform that actually allows you to create these rules that are accepted by all the parties when you are transacting in these different environments. And again, just to kind of rub in the point here is that typically these things are related to just having people on the ground, having the foot on the and hands-on access to these places where acceptance is needed, understanding the realities on the ground and what the people want, and then just making it happen. I think ePassi is a great example of making that happen without any kind of technical gimmicks.
And let's take it one step further there, Villa, right? They're doing programmable money without having to use cryptocurrencies or, any other forms of digital assets. There's no digital euros or anything else. It's no stable coins, no crypto. It is fiat currency.
I thought that's impossible according to the Bitcoin maximalists, that it's only possible with your own money. But okay, it's good that we have another point here to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
So, Janne, any reflections on the ePassi story or the crypto part of the story, if you want?
not really on the crypto part, but for sure, like great job from ePassi. As a Finnish fintech dude, I'm happy to have another fintech unicorn in Finland, as they actually announced the valuation was it 1.8 billions after that transaction. But yeah, the second thing is the ecosystem they have managed to build. So they have successfully incorporated the employees and the merchants, and now they have through acquiring companies, they have expanded to many markets and naturally starting from scratch is on a new market would be quite impossible, but they have managed to grow through acquiring. And the thing is that as they have their own ecosystem where they handle the money and the payment in between the customer and the merchant, they're actually taking more money from the transaction than the traditional payment methods. So they have actually done quite a tremendous job, and let's see if this goes further, that will someone start to question it, that why are we paying 3 or 4% to ePassi when the other methods are clearly cheaper. But of course, as they grow on the market, they probably also can afford to lower the fees a little bit. But yeah, taking over the entire ecosystem, the different players, and being the middleman. So yeah, you can make a pretty nice business out of it.
Yeah. I mean, remind me, or tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I seem to recall that ePassi was at least one of the first one, if not the first one in the Nordics to accept Alipay payments at the merchants where they are accepted.
Yes, so they've started collaboration with Alipay already quite a while ago, and they've started to do the clearing for Alipay and then later WeChat Pay in the Europe. So they've been the one to bring. I think they started with Finnair and then some basic Chinese tourist favorite places in Finland to put in the QR codes, and then doing the clearing and paying to the merchants. But yeah, that and then it of course grew into quite many merchants, not only in Finland but in Europe. But yeah, they did that already. Of course, now it hasn't probably been the best time for Chinese tourists in Finland or Europe in general the last years. But yeah, they have also that aspect.
Yeah.
I think one of the only thing that's sort of missing from the ePassi app is if they start actually supporting peer-to-peer instant payments as well, then they're going to wipe the floor, absolutely wipe the floor, because then you would use that as your single point for paying for your lunch, paying for your tickets, paying for your gym membership, and I can pay Villa, or I can pay half of the lunch with Jana and Villa when we go out and have a fintech pizza. You can do everything in the ePassi app.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fascinating story, and I like this kind of creating this ecosystem and then being able to create your own interoperability stories with whether that's the Chinese or other kind of closed loop systems or even open loop systems all across the world. And yeah, we will continue to follow this story, but we will move on next to the next story as well, because we are fast running out of time, as we usually do. So Janne, I guess you picked something from the buy now pay later space.
Yeah. So Klarna, as usual, coming up with new news every month, but now they have started a partnership with a company called Car Travel, which is a car rental company, and the idea is to bring buy now pay later there. So basically, you can rent a car and make installments or divide the payment on that one. And well, you could say maybe this is a natural path for Klarna to grow, but then at the same time you can start to think that is buy now pay later actually coming to everything. So in the future, when I go to Alepa to buy some groceries, so will I have a buy now pay later option there? And someone could be a bit worried about this trend, consumers losing control of their money. But then at the same time, you could say like, what's the difference from, you know, credit cards? You could have always been using credit cards. So what's your take on that?
Yes, I think we've had this BNPL discussion a couple of times in the podcast, and I'm going to repeat a few of my key points from my perspective. I think the most important thing for BNPL from a user experience perspective is that they usually and typically always tie the payment kind of a schedule to a certain item. So again, it's very contextual. So it's always related to a certain purchase rather than a generic balance that you have with a credit line on a card typically. So that's a good user experience in my mind, because you're able to see how much have I paid for these sneakers, how much have I already paid for this furniture that I bought, or in this case, a rental car agreement that I had for vacation when we went to Denmark in the summer or something like this. So you're able to kind of have this sense of achievement when you pay something off rather than kind of putting it into the black hole of the credit line that you have just with your card. That's one thing. The second thing is that because of this relationships for BNPL schemes on a merchant by merchant basis, the merchants are also able to, in a much more effective way, to create campaigns around BNPL. So if the merchant decides to subsidize the interest payments or the fee payments on the BNPL, that means that you are able to have almost like individual deals. So for example, you could have pay this now in 5 installments, then you will get 0% interest, 0 fees, and then that cost is taken by the merchant for that specific category of items. That type of flexibility doesn't exist in a typical kind of credit card scheme, where you would have to deal with the issuer of the card in order to arrange for that financing specifically for your kind of store and your kind of a campaign that you want to run. Quite slow, I would imagine. So I think this merchant centricity here is a good thing. Then on the negative side, as always, this is a way for people to spend more faster and probably lose a little bit control on how to actually control their spending. I think I saw a number where 40% of people in the UK who were part of this survey were using BNPL to finance their Christmas purchases in December. 40% is a fairly high number. So clearly it's very kind of interesting for people to do that. The question is, how many of those 40% did really seriously consider how will they pay it back? That remains to be seen. And finally, I think the reason for the growth of the BNPL sector is quite clearly the absence of good regulatory controls and supervision in this space. So that has allowed this space to grow much faster than people were even predicting. But now the regulators are coming on board a little bit and trying to, control this lending in the same way as you would expect to have any type of consumer lending regulated. So we'll probably see this little bit of better controls, better consumer protection happening in the BNPL space soon. But yeah, I mean, those were my kind of main four takeaways for this news. How about you, Paul?
Oh, don't get me started. I'll make. Everybody knows this, that there are two things that I have a passionate dislike for. One is Bitcoin, and the other one is buy now, pay later, or as I like to call it, buy now, panic later. But it's not because of Bitcoin being Bitcoin or buy now, pay later being buy now, pay later. It's because of the governance, the implementation, the lack of regulation, the way that the industry is taking advantage of financial literacy and so many other things to benefit from those that are, I don't want to say less educated, but are looking for ways to alleviate their financial burden, right? So from a buy now, pay later perspective, it needs regulation. It needs to have consumer protection. And I've been shouting about this from the start. Get the regulation in place, get consumer protection in place, then I think that it's great, right? And back to your comment, Jana, in the UK, they've actually had, since we had the cost of living crisis, they've actually had the ability to use buy now, pay later for grocery shopping. And it's been proven to actually be really detrimental if you've got people using buy now, pay later to pay for their weekly shopping, because all you're doing is just stacking debt on top of debt and then worrying about how you're going to pay for it later as you get into worse and worse situations. In regards to buy now, pay later versus credit cards, I mean, the way that we manage credit cards and the way that credit companies have got visibility of your credit rating, so on and so forth, is a huge benefit over how buy now, pay later has been managed. Because me as a consumer, if I'm using buy now, pay later, only the one buy now, pay later merchant can see what my debt is. Anyone else can't. So that means that I can actually run up a worse situation for myself with buy now, pay later compared to with a credit card. And with a credit card, at least you've got much better consumer protection and everything else around it. So that was my rant of buy now, pay later. As for the current news article, I can't think of anything worse than paying for a hire car with buy now, pay later. When you think about, and I'm sorry to all the hire car companies out there, the scams associated with hire cars. I mean, I hired a car the last time we went on holiday to the UK, and why I didn't use one of the top 3 vendors for hire cars, I don't know. But the amount that I thought I was going to pay compared to what I paid in the end was a huge discrepancy. And if that was going to end up on a buy now, pay later, and I picked buy now, pay later because I can't actually afford to hire that car in the first place, I'm ending up in a world of hurt.
Couldn't agree more. By the way, it wouldn't have helped if you picked it one of the top 3. So it's, I mean, this is actually a challenge for you, dear audience here. Have you ever rented a car and then actually ended up paying the amount that you had in the beginning when you actually returned the car? I would argue that 100% of these answers will be no. There's always this kind of unbelievable amount of different kind of surcharges, and I'm sure all of those line items make sense, but there is a lack of transparency here. I think that's actually would be an interesting way to disrupt the market, would be that you actually tell upfront how much you're going to be paying, and being very kind of clear on what are the kind of excesses that will be coming if you do something wrong with the car. Which links us back to this story. I think I think the interesting opportunity here, I'm sure it's not included in the current scope of this agreement, but would be that these rental cars, of course, they produce a lot of data. So you have the connected car, you have all the data about how it's being driven, where it's being driven, and even what radio station you're listening to, and what kind of music you're listening to, and if it's going to make you drive faster or not. And everything is available on these cars. If you combine that with incentives, this kind of flexible tariffs that we talked about earlier. So if the rental company wants to say, so for example, I want to run a campaign that if you drive under certain conditions, and then we will give you this 5 installments with fixed payments, and that's it. You can actually do this with the BNPL scheme quite flexibly, more flexibly than you could do with the usual card, I think. And I think connecting this kind of usage data and IoT connected devices would be an interesting opportunity to combine with BNPL in the future. And again, the goal being more transparency and predictability for the actual payment on this space. So Jan, I mean, have you rented a car ever and known how much you actually paid in the end?
Yeah, I have rented cars for sure, but yeah, I at least I have not been fooled very badly, because I don't remember that it would have been anything like super dramatic. But of course there's always something that, you know, you drove 5 kilometers after you fueled it and so on, and the windows were a bit dirty.
Yeah. And then
but maybe in this case, if Klarna is clearly also in this news, they are promoting their responsibility and so on, so perhaps they could also like force their car rental companies to play a fair, transparent game.
Yeah, the opportunities are there for sure, and the market is ripe for disruption, let's put it that way. So let's hope this is a step towards that direction. But again, time is running, so we have to take up one more news item from the list of. Again, I have to say the December newsletter was fantastic. There were so many interesting stories that I would have loved to talk about with you guys here on the podcast. But I did end up choosing the one that is, I would say, fairly obvious if you've been listening to the earlier news episodes. And that is the Nordea and OP Bank in Finland setting up a joint venture for instant payments and e-invoicing in the Nordics. And the reason why it's interesting is because just a bit of background and history for people who are not familiar with the Nordic instant payment space, especially in Finland. The kind of original instant person-to-person payment scheme was, of course, mobile pay, which started in Denmark by Danske Bank. They started gradually moving into other countries, and then we saw, for example, in Sweden, the banks came together and started Swish, which became kind of the national standard for Sweden when they want to do person-to-person payments on mobile. Then we had in Norway, we had Vipps that came up, and Vipps became kind of the dominant player in Norway. In Finland, it was mostly mobile pay, but the banks did come together, kind of forming around this alliance around the existing ATM network in Finland, and they started a brand called Siirto. Siirto is Finnish word for transfer, by the way, so it sounds weird. It's just because it's Finnish. The Siirto was basically supposed to be running on the ATM network rails for person-to-person mobile payments by most of the Finnish banks, at least the larger ones were part of that. Now, they did launch it. It was a fairly good success, but in Finland, Siirto ran into heavy competition from mobile pay. And there's actually an interesting story behind this, that there really isn't no technical reason why the Siirto would not have been a success in Finland, but they did have some obstacles from the antitrust elements of the Finnish, let's say, regulatory bodies, because they were the banks, all the kind of majority share banks in Finland coming together, they were not allowed to do things like advertising. So they were not allowed to advertise the Siirto brand in any shape or form. And at the same time, mobile pay had ads running all over the place on TV and all the kind of possible places to actually make the brand known. So nobody really knew what Siirto was. And because Siirto was just kind of a brand on multiple banks, it also was very unclear for the consumers, what is this Siirto even? Because it's OP Siirto, is it Nordea Siirto, is it S-Bank Siirto? What is it? And it became very difficult for people to actually use and understand. So for all these reasons, the usage of Siirto was not as much as you would expect for a technical solution like that. Now, fast forward to last couple of years, what happened is that some of the banks in Finland moved away from Siirto, and in fact, at the same time we saw Vipps and mobile pay starting to merge, which they then finally did after the antitrust authorities of the European Union approved that. But there was one condition. Originally, the OP Bank in Finland was supposed to be part of this alliance, so they wanted to be a part shareholder of the Vipps mobile pay kind of merger. But then one of the conditions from the EU antitrust was that OP cannot be part of that, because then it would be, let's say, two dominant market positions. So OP was left out, Vipps and mobile pay merged, and that train is still moving forward. And I think we're seeing some interesting news from that direction as well. But OP Bank was kind of left alone. Nordea was also never part of the Vipps, at least not in a major way. Of course, they were there in Norway, but not in a major way part of this merger between mobile pay and Vipps. So now Nordea and OP are almost like resurrecting the Siirto alliance, and they're coming together to form a JV in Finland to, first of all, enable all the usual things that the Siirto already did, which was instant person-to-person payments. They're also structuring it a little bit differently, which I think might mean that they will be able to do things like advertising in the future. But just to summarize this news story, after this very long history lesson, is that what actually differentiates this from other solutions in this space? And that's a very good question. One thing that kind of I was struck by was the fact that they put heavy emphasis on e-invoicing as part of this e-invoicing for small and medium-sized enterprises using these same rails. Now, that's interesting. E-invoicing really is not the focus for any of the competition, Vipps, Mobile Pay, at least not in Finland. So I think this could be interesting. If it allows the merchants to actually send invoices, standard e-invoices, just by using a mobile phone number, that is a fantastic move forward. Anybody who has been using e-invoicing, which by the way, in a sense is great, but the user experience for e-invoicing is less than stellar, I would say. You actually have to have a paper invoice, you have to go to your e-banking, and then you have to subscribe to that invoice in your e-banking. And then you have to kind of hope that you actually get the invoice in your e-banking, because if you happen to subscribe in 2 different places, you never know where the invoice is going and so forth. There's all sorts of usability problems in the e-invoicing space in the banks. So maybe this could be a way to simplify that process, especially from the invoice issuing side. And this could be a niche for this new JV. So again, very long rant. Sorry for taking so much airtime, but Janne, what are your thoughts around this? Does anything I say make any sense to you?
Yeah, sure. Because that's something we've been thinking, is that, you know, European EU-wise, they're building standards and you know, promising infrastructure regarding real-time payments, request to pay, and so on. And the issue seems to be a little bit that if it's running on IBAN account numbers, that's not the best usability case, because most of the people don't know their or their company's account numbers. So you need a middle layer where to link the account into something, your phone number or your Instagram account or whatever, something you know. So I see in this case, OP and Nordea are building the directory of how to link the phone numbers and the accounts, and then on top of that you can start to build a whole lot of things. It can be, you know, B2C, C2C, invoicing, whatever. And mobile pay, of course, already has been working on this for quite a while, but now it's interesting to see what will eventually come out of this case. But at the same time, the question is that could we have something that would be, you know, EU level wide or something, that now we are still working in this kind of blocks that, you know, hey, we have a few companies in Finland and then we have a few companies from Finland and Norway and so on. It's a bit of a, you know, mess of clusters.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation about the upcoming EU regulations. So they're going to drop the hammer on these schemes, basically forcing them to interoperate. So the idea is that in the future, according to this upcoming regulation, you should be able to send money instantly person to person with MSISDN or other aliases, not using the IBAN number. Remains to be seen how that happens, but one way to comply to that is to actually interoperate with these kind of closed schemes that we have today. So interesting times for sure. Paul, your thoughts?
My thought, well, first of all, I'm astonished by the amount of passion you've got for this news article and your history of instant payments in Finland. It was a trip down memory lane and a good education process for a lot of our listeners, I hope. But I actually have, I can understand why Nordea and OP are doing this, right? I think I hear jingles of request to pay in there, right, with sending invoices and those sort of things. It sounds a little bit more like they're focusing on the SME market or the B2C market rather than C2C, like mobile pay, etc. But at the risk of being the cranky old man of this podcast episode, I will actually say that how many apps do I need on my bloody mobile phone? We need consolidation, not unbundling. And I like the idea that you said around, you know, finding interoperability. I think that's one of the biggest issues we've got in the Nordics, is the fact that, Christ, I've got 5 different apps for parking my car, right? I don't need 5 apps, and I don't want to spend time trying to figure out which app I need to use for the parking space that I've parked in. Give me one app. or give me interoperability across them so I can pick one app and then everything works. The same with, digital wallets, the same way, like we said, there is going to be the digital wallet that rules the digital wallets, and there's going to be the instant payment that rules the instant payment. And God forbid we end up with even more apps. I want this to be consolidated. I want this to be simplified, because I don't want to fill up my mobile phone memory just with the apps. I want to fill up my mobile phone memory with the photographs and memories and the joy that I have with my friends and family, not 15 parking apps. So, cranky old man signing off for this episode. Nordea and
There you go.
you're doing a great job, but let's find a way of making it all work together, guys.
That makes a lot of sense. There's another conversation to be had around interoperability in general, because the overall problem, number one problem for interoperability is that the business case for interoperability is very difficult to justify wherever you are. It's always easy to counter the interoperability conversation by saying that, we keep this closed loop, we actually make better money. So why would we invest in developing any of these interoperability things? And yes, there are counterpoints to that, but that's why I'm referring that it's a conversation that we should have in a different episode due to time constraints that we have right now. But again, yeah, so I actually agree on your cranky old man point, because I think we talked about this on Christmas Day when we got together with you, Paul. I think I have 11 applications for my car alone, and these are excluding the parking applications. So yeah, I think it's getting a little bit out of control. Let's put it that way. Good, but we are up against it on time, and the time flies when you're having fun, as we always say on Fintech Daydreaming. Any final thoughts from you, especially Janne?
Well, I think you put it quite nicely, and yeah, I gotta say, we could almost cut your historic chapter from the mobile payment field and put it as a tutorial or something. But yeah, definitely very interesting in topics we discussed, and I think we will get back to this for quite a many times during this year or next. So yeah.
Excellent. Paul, anything for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna save you, my good friend, because you have gone headstrong into the first episode of season 9. Really excited. You've given us passion around instant payments and everything else, and you completely forgot the fact that we need to have a good but bad joke.
Oh, we did. Thank you for saving the episode. I mean, that was almost a big omission. I mean, I always pride myself by putting it in the beginning, so we have to now make an exception and have it here in the end.
Yeah.
So I guess the honors go to you, Janne. Do we have a joke for our audience today?
Yeah, we have a investor joke. I got that. This is actually advice I got from an angel investor, but the question is, how do you make a small fortune investing in startups?
Tell me.
You start with a large fortune.
I think I've heard a version of that in different contexts, but that is especially true in fintech investing. I can tell you that.
Yep. Especially now.
Indeed.
Yes.
Again, thank you, Paul, for saving the episode. I'm sure our audience was kind of wondering where the earth is the joke, but there you go. We got it. Last minute save, so there we go. Good. So that was it for the first episode of this season. Looking forward to a very exciting season before we close for summer. So we have plenty of interesting guests aligned in the line, and we have, of course, the Nordic Fintech Highlights episodes as usual every month. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please go like, subscribe, leave a review, comment. All of that helps a lot. And if you didn't like this episode, send us an email. That's a nice way to get in touch and make sure we improve on the episodes that we do. But with all that being said, enjoy a very lucrative and successful 2024. And this has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.